All right, thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. My name is Kymberlee Price. I am CEO and co-founder of Zatik Security. We're a sponsor of BSides Buffalo, and I'm excited to be a sponsor of BSides Buffalo, even though it meant a flight from Seattle, because I love small regional conferences. Our focus at Zatik is small and medium businesses and helping them be secure by design, because so much of the security industry is leaving small and medium businesses behind and not meeting their needs. And what better place to come and actually talk to people and understand the realities they're facing than at regional conferences. So I was just recently at NOLACon in New Orleans. I'm going to Richmond, Virginia after this. And so after the talk today, if anyone's like, any of this resonated, or I want to talk to you about some of the challenges we have at my company, I would love to talk about them. My co-founder, Zach Glick, is a Buffalo native. He's actually speaking in track 2 right now, and I jokingly refer to him as the unofficial mayor of Buffalo because he is constantly trying to convince me and anyone else who will listen that we should all relocate to Buffalo. It's going to be great. Cost of living is good. Climate change is apparently going to really benefit y'all. And so I figured we had to come and be here today. What I'm going to talk about, I've been in security like 20 years, did a bunch of incident response. You can find me on LinkedIn if you really care about all the things I've done in the past and why I should be here. But this was a really hard talk to prepare for when I first wrote it, because I was very depressed. I was very sad. Vulnerabilities are still getting popped every day. Log4j was, a couple years ago. I had to work that incident. Well, my team had to work that incident. We are now 10 years after Heartbleed. And what have we learned? It is rinse and repeat. Attackers are getting in through weak passwords, through shared passwords, through credential stuffing. They don't need ODay to compromise a company. They can phish you. They can phish your marketing intern, and because companies haven't done a good job of zero trust implementation, because it's hard and it's expensive, and we'll eventually get to it, a lot of them have flat networks still. A lot of them are still running with no employee access controls. So you have access to everything within the company, and there's no logging. So nobody knows the developer in San Francisco has been logging in from Russia at 2 in the morning and downloading 2 terabytes of customer data. Mm-hmm. So it's feeling like we're not making progress. And honestly, I would just like to go off the grid and raise baby goats. But that is not a helpful conference talk. And also, baby goats grow up into adult goats, and they're kind of creepy. So let's actually talk about how we can make security better. And we're going to talk about DevSecOps, but it applies beyond DevSecOps as well. That if security were just a technical problem, we would have automated it already. It would not continue to be a problem. Security is a human problem, and humans are complicated, and humans are terrible at assessing risk in general. On the one hand, they're sort of okay at threat modeling, just naturally. I live in a high crime neighborhood and I have really valuable stuff. I should lock my door. I should have a good lock. Maybe I want bars on my windows. Maybe I want a dog. I live in the country down a 2-mile dirt road. I'm 10 miles from my nearest neighbor, and I have IKEA furniture and no electronics. Who cares if I lock the door? And so people think that way about their belongings to some degree. Women walk to their car in the parking lot with keys threaded through their fingers because they're threat modeling their risk. But when it comes to cyber risk, yes, I will click that link. It looks completely legitimate. And I want to see the dancing hamsters. That sounds great. And so there have been studies that indicate after somebody's credit card got compromised about 10 years ago, and they had to deal with all the pain in the butt calls to the bank and arguing about fraud, that they would get a lot more aware of their security for a few months, and then it would trail off again. And now banks are so good at detecting fraud and preventing it from going through and notifying you, that doesn't even happen anymore. And so that's great. Technology is preventing the bad things from happening, and we've got better detection. but it changes people's awareness of their risk. And this happens all the time in technology and among engineers. Is anyone really going to attack that? That seems really implausible. You end up debating theoretical risk versus real risk with your engineering teams because they want to go ship new features. They don't want to do this boring hygiene maintenance stuff. And so developers make poor choices just like our neighbors do. And, I know this other developer is using the libpng library. I'm going to use it too. It's clearly already been approved by whoever approves what libraries we use. Well, why are you implementing two different versions of libpng in your application? Aren't you linking them? Why don't you have a centralized store for this? You realize next libpng vulnerability, you have to patch both of them in your code base. Oh, you're not patching your code base for open source vulnerabilities because that's theoretical risk and the volume is too high and you need to ship features. And so all these trade-offs get made with some pretty questionable outcomes. So why is DevSecOps so popular if developers aren't really great at assessing risk? Well, it's the promise of less security interruption. We're going to enable the developers. We're going to shift left and enable the developers. They're smart. They'll make the right decisions if we give them the information. How many developers do you know who actually understands what CVSS means? It's just like blinky lights and colors. It's like, this is red, that's bad. Why is it red? I disagree with you that it should be red, but I can't explain why I disagree. It's red, And so we're throwing security tools at them without actually giving them that baseline knowledge. And the idea that we can shift left and make it the engineer's issue to go resolve is really popular among executives who see security as a roadblock. Security is a friction point for innovation. So we're going to enable the developers to own their risk. But do the developers understand their risk? We haven't asked that question effectively in most organizations that are racing towards DevSecOps. And a lot of DevSecOps programs are really just, we're going to throw some tools in the dev pipeline. It's not really a program. It's just SAST, DAST, software component analysis. We're good, right? So the engineering team is now deputized to own security risk without understanding security risk. And we can lower the size and the budget for security headcount in the security organization, which looks really good on the P&L statements. So here's how DevSecOps gets done wrong. We've got all these tools in the dev pipeline that we expect developers to go look at security dashboards and then understand them. And there's a dozen or more different tools they have to look at. If you're using GitHub, you might have GitHub Advanced Security, which has secret leak, like a detection for secrets that are in code and insecurely stored. It has Dependabot. It'll help you identify what dependencies need patching. But you've also got probably something like Sneak or Fossa, because Dependabot is great for finding the vulnerability dependencies, not good for your legal licensing risk. And so you might still need a secondary solution in that pipeline because you're not just dealing with technical risk. You've got your SAST tooling and your DAST tooling. Some of those tools have overlap. Maybe you're in an environment that's running SonarQube, Detectify, Lacework, and they're all finding different vulnerabilities. And you expect the developers to go look at each of these tool dashboards and in some cases manually cut Jira tickets or Azure DevOps or GitHub tickets to go fix a thing. And all of these tools report by CVE. So let's imagine for a minute that you've got an open source library that released a new version that fixed 25 CVEs. Those tools will list 25 findings in your code base instead of saying, hey, developer, go update FreeType. and you will resolve 25 vulnerabilities. It's going to issue 25 findings that look like noise and is not helping the developer do the job. But also, so we've talked about tool noise. They don't look at those dashboards. As you get better at finding vulnerabilities, you're going to make your engineering teams even more frustrated because you're digging up more issues for them to go fix. I have had a vice president of engineering ask me after 6 months of my team fixing all the broken tools in the dev pipeline, and we started issuing tickets in waves because we knew we would overwhelm them. In complete earnest sincerity, he asked when security would be done filing tickets. Well, when the product goes out of support, it's not even when it ends development, it's when it goes out of support that we will stop filing tickets, because then we can tell customers it's unsupported code, we don't patch it anymore. But we will never be done filing tickets, and so we are constantly showing up with more work for our engineering teams. We expect the engineers to be experts at everything, including these security issues that they don't necessarily understand. But then engineering isn't staffed to maintain all this open source that they use. I give an entire talk on open source risk, and most engineers walk out of it angry at me. That I have told them, you are now an IT admin that has to worry about patching your code base every time any open source releases an update, and none of them open. But there's no Patch Tuesday for open source. They just release fixes whenever they have a fix available. And you have to monitor your Sneak or your FOSSA or your whatever your tool is to go update that. And what's crazy is those tools are an improvement over what the industry had in 2014. In 2014, when Heartbleed hit, I was working in incident response at BlackBerry. And I subscribed to every open source mailing list for FreeType, libpng, WebKit. I got hundreds of emails. I was scraping Secunia to look for every single open source issue that would affect our products. It was all manual. So I'm not trying to complain about software component analysis tools. It is better than what we used to have, but there's still a ways to go in improving the developer experience and the developer workflow. And honestly, even the security teams workflow. So if engineering isn't staffed to maintain, excuse me, if they're not staffed to maintain all the open source they're using, and to be clear, they're using open source because it accelerates development, but it doesn't accelerate maintenance. We also have a problem that security isn't staffed to provide adequate coverage and depth. So the engineering team comes to the security team and says, hey, we need your help doing a threat model or a design review of this new product that we're going to release in 6 months. And the security team says, 6 months? I have another team that showed up 3 days ago and said they're releasing next week. I have to scramble and throw myself on that, and we'll get to you sometime before you release. And so we're not showing up when they need us because we're also understaffed. So this comes down to blame, fear, and avoidance. Engineering teams avoid working with security because we're not helpful, we're late, and when we do show up, we tell them no. And we're frustrated with engineering teams because they show up late, they're not doing what we think they should do because they don't understand what we think they should do. And it creates this tension and hostility between security and engineering teams, which gets back to, this is why DevSecOps is popular. We're going to put control in the hands of the developers because the developers run the company because they're creating what generates revenue. And there is nothing to secure without the developers. So we all have jobs because of developers. We are a cost center. And how do we get to a point where we're enabling the business versus slowing it down? And we look at every problem as an absolute frequently. We have a shortage of experienced security talent in this industry. And We will throw engineers at every problem, even when maybe a program manager is the better solution. We will hire all senior people instead of hiring junior entry-level training people up because security is too high risk and we have a limited security budget and we don't have time to train people. And so we need a senior security engineer to go configure Okta? No, you don't. You don't need a senior security engineer for that. You don't need a senior security engineer to triage your HackerOne or your BugCrowd bug bounty. You do need senior security engineers, but you also need other skill sets and other capabilities within your team. We can eliminate toil through a lot of our great security engineering and tooling, and an entry-level person is who's going to end up picking up the little bits of toil we still haven't automated, and there will always be toil. So we've got to really diversify our toolkit, and that's not just the technical tools, but our human resources as well in these teams. Engineers don't get excited about driving stakeholder alignment. They're not really great at writing executive communications about risk because they get into the details of this is a buffer overflow with a CVSS of 9.8 that results in remote code execution. And the vice president who has to sign off on that risk understands none of that. The line from the first Avengers movie where Iron Man is talking to Captain America and Captain America says, it appears to run on some sort of electricity. That is the executive reaction to this is a CVSS 9.8 remote code execution vulnerability due to buffer overflow. What the executive needs to hear is a malformed font in email if the customer is using HTML rendering will compromise memory on the device. And the only workaround is to view your email in plain text. Well, that's an unacceptable user experience. We can't allow that to ship. And now the executive is motivated to fix it. That's going to come from your program managers, your customer-focused technical writers, who can take the technical information from the engineer and communicate it in a way the audience can understand. Sometimes that audience is your developers and not just the executives. So we're back to baby goats because I'm still very depressed and frustrated about the state of the security industry. Okay, no, we'll try something new. Let's try something new. As we've talked about, security engineers aren't good at everything. When you are solving a simple problem, maybe you can go solve it alone. But security is rarely a simple problem, and you need to build your party. You may need a barbarian, a bard, and a rogue for this particular thing. And maybe your bard is your communications expert. And your rogue is the person who's really good at thinking offensive security. And maybe your barbarian is the person doing your automation development work, where it's like, we're going to hammer this code together and reduce toil, and it's going to be great. Like, think about how you build your teams and your organizations and what you bring to that table in terms of diversity to get the job done. Because as we talked about, security is a human problem. It's not just a technical problem. And so bringing these diverse views into your security organizations really helps you build a better program and get better outcomes. I am a cleric bard. I am all about helping people and making things better and the communication and the storytelling. But a lot of engineers view all of that as soft skills. And I have friends, how hard can it be? It's actually very hard. There is a trade craft to being great at not just this sort of soft communication, but shaping the narrative. Not just giving people data, but telling them what the data means and what they should think about it. And this is what our engineering partners need from us, is opinionated advice about this is why this is risky and how we should fix it, and then a dialogue where they can share maybe why they disagree. Yes, yes, we do use the log4j library, but we don't use the vulnerable component. Well, security team should have caught that already, but it didn't, and that's okay because we can have the conversation about, okay, we don't use the vulnerable component. How are we going to message that to customers? Because customers are running vuln scanning, and they're freaking out that they think we're vulnerable to log4j. And you're telling me we're not, but we have to explain to them why we're not. So let's have that conversation, because it might actually just be faster to update the library and let them feel good about it than it would be to have all the customer support calls coming in where we read them the same script about why you don't actually have to worry about this in your Rapid7 or whatever your vuln management platform is telling you. So think about tech writers, think about GRC people, think about program managers and your security engineers and your security developers as all components of a really healthy security program. And if you're in a small, scrappy team where you don't have all of those skills, identify sister teams and sibling teams. Let's go with sibling teams that you can tap into and partner with. I had a team where one of my program managers really needed some tooling development done for his program, which was working with external partners. And our own in-house engineering team didn't have time for him for at least 6 to 8 months. And he was really frustrated because he'd already been waiting a year for these features. So we found another team inside the company that had that his partners were also their partners. They had shared interest in making these partners really happy with the company, and they had dev resources, and they dev'd the feature for him. Huge win, because he was able to go out and find like other resources in the company that could help. So think outside your organizational boundaries if you can, if you have that opportunity to go and tap into a product manager who really cares about the customer experience and can help you out with some of those things if you don't have that in your security organization. This usually raises some eyebrows. I hate security champions programs. And I hate them because they're usually underfunded. And similar to DevSecOps, we have executives. Executives love security champion programs because in their mind, we don't need as big a security team because we have security champions in the engineering groups. I'm sorry, don't those developers have full-time jobs already? When are they doing security champion work? Are you hiring more developers to make space for that security work? What is their security training? What is their security support? I have talked to so many security champions who were developers who were excited about security, and a couple years in, they are so jaded. They're so disappointed. They're like, my management wants me to rubber stamp risk decisions that from a security perspective I disagree with. I have no goals around security. All my goals are around just shipping features still. I have no internal support or connection to other security champions to share best practices. And my only career path, if I want to do security, is to leave my engineering team and go work in a security team. Security can't be volunteerism. It is a function that the business needs to invest in. And so when I start seeing executives say, we're going to do security champions, we're going to hire a full-time program manager to curate this internal community and give them what they need to be successful. We are going to put security in their performance goals and their managers' performance goals so that everyone is accountable for this. And it's not just a nice to have, you've got a security buddy. Then I will get on board with the idea of security champions. I have seen companies do this extremely well and actually do those things, actually assign a person who is taking care of that community and making sure that they're successful and having growth opportunities and that it works well. And they're phenomenal. And they act as this diplomatic emissary for the security team, where the security team is having regular one-on-ones and group meetups, like a quarterly, we're getting the champions together with the security team. Because who's going to know better the future roadmap of the company and of the product than the people in the product team. And so when the security team is feeling like they're isolated and not, like they don't know what's going on, I'm just in a cave and somebody comes and tells me 2 weeks before they're releasing, or maybe 2 days before they're releasing, oh, by the way, we have a product launch on Monday. I'm sorry, what? Wow, how is this the first I have heard about it? If you want to get out in front of those releases, having a tight relationship with those individuals that are in the team is incredibly valuable. If your organization doesn't have a security champions program and you're struggling to know what is coming down the pike so you can plan for it, so you can feel more self-determination and control about, I know what my priorities are for the next 3 months in terms of helping my product teams, find the product managers for those groups. They know exactly what's shipping when. And if you're in a small and medium company that doesn't have a product management team, just because you're a security engineer doesn't mean you can't go schedule a one-on-one with the engineering manager and say, hey, engineering manager, how can I better support you? I would love to, can I get a look at your roadmap for the next 6 months? And that'll really help you understand where, what's going to be coming at your direction. But again, one last thing about security champions, I refer to them as diplomatic ambassadors. They're not our minions. They're not like, oh, we'll just outsource this to the security champions. Like they're doing valuable work when they're appropriately supported. And so, treat them like part of the team, not, us versus them kind of stuff. I would like everyone to read this one out loud. We are going to stop rolling your eyes at compliance. Security by compliance is awful. It absolutely is. When you have an engineering group that only does the minimum viable security that meets compliance so we can get this compliance certification. The security theater of a company that implements tools required for compliance and then shuts off the notifications and doesn't actually do them. Those things happen, and those are terrible. And there are not helpful compliance professionals, just like there are not helpful security professionals. But the concept of a compliance program is ultimately around customer trust. There is no consumer reports for software development. And until we have actual SBOMs, software bill of materials, to tell our customers exactly what is in a product, the only way a customer has to know you did the right things for software security is you got a compliance certification. This is how I validate without saying, hi, I'm interested in purchasing your product. I would like to interview your engineering team and look at your dev pipeline, and I'd like to see your ticket backlog to see what kind of issue that. No customer is going to do that, and no sales team is going to let them do that. The easiest way for a customer to know you have done the right security things is that compliance certification. And if we are doing the right things for security, compliance shouldn't be hard. There's a lot of bureaucracy involved, there's a lot of paperwork involved, and there are a lot of really interesting startups trying to solve that problem now to make it less painful, to make sales enablement easier. There are platforms being built for a customer to say, I'm interested in your product. I have a questionnaire. Well, you know what? We've pre-answered all of the questions that customers have ever asked us ever. Here you go. Here's the standardized format. So there are improvements in this area, but if we make compliance our enemy, we're missing out on a potential ally to help us get the right things done for the company, because secure software should just be compliant. And so just as we have secure by design, we should have compliant by design as well. And so they're a useful partner for us to work with. So another thing that we in security need to do is really redefine our perspective. Very frequently, we are the house of no. We tell the engineering teams, no, you can't do that. We also tell customers, no, you can't do that. We say no a lot. And that's why people avoid working with us, because we're always saying no. We're the traffic cops. And this ends up being somewhat destructive to our ability to influence the business and build relationships. Ultimately, security is just QA. We're just QA. We are all about quality engineering. And what's funny is if you talk to developers about quality engineering, they get fired up. Yeah, we do quality engineering. We are good developers. No one says, I write crap code. It's fine. They want to write good code, and quality code is reliable. It doesn't fall over every day. It is accessible. It is well documented, and quality code is secure. So if we stop writing security standards and we go work with our engineering partners and architects and say, hey, I love your engineering standards. Can we integrate some security things in your engineering standards? Now we're not other. We're us. We are focused on how do you develop quality code. You don't have to go look at a separate standards document, a separate policy document. And now it also aligns to those architects' accountabilities. As the architect for this product, I am accountable that we are meeting our engineering quality benchmarks. Well, those engineering quality benchmarks now include things like secret storage, which is where you want it to be, where the engineers are working. It is in their workflow. Behavioral psychology has concepts of rewards and punishments. Security is always showing up with punishments and negative reinforcement. We're always saying no. Policy, compliance, rules, standards. We're never saying, here's this great thing you can do with your product, with your engineering. Here's how we're going to enable the business. And so we have to think about the what's in it for them a little more instead of just for us. And that's really hard because we're expected to be perfect every time, all the time. And if the engineering team says, I accept the risk on that issue, I don't think it's real, it's a theoretical risk, it's highly unlikely. And you're like, no, I'm pretty sure it's highly likely. I don't have an offensive researcher on the team that can go build a POC of exploit code, but we think you should fix it. And they're like, we're going to accept risk. And then 6 months later, it gets popped. Hey, you're the one working overtime on incident response now, losing your weekends and holidays and evenings, because you're the cleanup crew. And everyone wants to know, how did this get shipped? Why didn't we catch it sooner? Why didn't you argue more compellingly that we can't accept the risk on this? Somehow it always still comes back to us. So it's really hard. I'm not trying to trivialize how hard this is to make those trade-offs. But we have to start taking those chances and educating our leadership teams. I'm hoping some of you here today are in leadership teams and can take this back to your business and be like, hey, it's okay if the security team isn't perfect all the time, because no one is. And if you want perfect all the time from your security team, you are creating that friction that inhibits innovation. You have to take some calculated risks to get products out in market and say, you know what, it's okay, we're not going to fix this before we ship. It's not critical, but it is pretty important, and we need to get it out within the first quarter after we launch. And then that actually has to happen. The engineering team has to not just keep punting that down the road, and so it's that relationship you build with the engineering teams. I had, early in my career, bought into the bias that security is special and different and more important than QA. And in 2014, a friend of mine, we had an argument. It wasn't like a shouting argument. It was just, spirited disagreement. Because he was like, security is just QA. And I'm like, no, it's not. These are exploitable vulnerabilities, and we have to protect people. And now, 10 years later, I'm like, no, he's right. He's right. It's just QA. And most companies nowadays don't even do QA. They've also shifted that left to the developers and to their bug bounty programs and to their security teams. And so if we think about it that way, where it's our job to make sure that quality is getting out to our customers, it helps us reduce the pressure on ourselves of security has to be perfect all the time. One of the problems that security teams have is we don't actually know the customers of our company because we're isolated in security. We don't know where revenue comes from. What customer segment drives the most revenue? What product drives the most revenue for the company? What do these new features unlock in the upcoming quarter? We're usually extremely isolated from the sales team to understand what questions are customers asking the sales team about our products. Do any of them even ask about security? Are they asking about security features? Are your customers asking about when are you going to support SSO? That might be one of the most important questions customers ask because they don't want to implement MFA because it's a pain without SSO. And so if you don't support SSO, you're not letting your customers secure your product in their environment. And so that might be the question coming to sales. Is that question then getting to the product teams? Can you help bridge that to say, hey, product team, I know you're working on this cool new generative AI feature. Do you know how many sales we could unblock if we support SSO this quarter? And so that gets more into the secure by design, but now it's data-driven secure by design that drives revenue. And so how can we help bridge that gap and get more security features in that will prevent incidents for ourselves and for our customers by understanding what our customers care about? If the majority of your customers are pay-as-you-go startup clients and not big enterprises, that might change the security features and the security controls that you need to care about. And how you allocate your resources in your security team. So take some time to get to know your customers. I had a engineering team come to my team once and say, we need to change the authentication protocol because it's causing problems for some customers, and we basically want to do all these things. And my team sat there and talked to them and were like, you can't do any of those teams. Everything that we do about identity and access into the product, you're weakening. And about 2 weeks later, I was at a customer conference, and I ended up talking with one of these customers. They're an MSSP. And so they're using our product for multiple additional customers. And every time they had to log into a new customer in our platform, they were going through, it took them 5 minutes to log into each one. It was, I'm going to log in the application, and then I have to go get a code from my email, and then I go back to the application and I enter the code, and it sends me another email that I then have, and I watched the customer workflow, and that's when I understood the problem. Even the engineering team didn't understand the customer problem. And within 2 minutes, we're like, oh, well, this is exactly how we could fix this for you without compromising the security of the login experience. And so frequently, companies are afraid to let the security team talk to customers because we're scary. But it doesn't have to be that way. And so if you can find somebody in your sales or customer success team that you can build a relationship with, see if you can go talk to a couple customers. Go to a couple customer conferences or events or places where your customers congregate, and just chat with them and see what's important to them. This one's real hard because of what I said earlier about us having to be perfect all the time. But we can't. We can't be perfect all the time. Our product teams can't be perfect all the time. We will drop some things. And so the question is, what do we drop? I've seen engineering teams being completely crushed by the weight of vulnerabilities that they have to patch because they've got a terrible history of hygiene and maintenance. And there's a new security head of security, new CISO, new team, whatever it might be, that came in, fixed all the broken tools, and unleashed a nightmare of technical debt on the product teams. And so saying to them, hey, we're in the amnesty phase right now. We're going to give you time to get caught up. We know you're not going to drop all development for the next 6 months to go clean up the last 4 years of technical debt. And that's okay. We know all of these bugs are going to go out of SLA. We're not going to extend the SLA because the SLA is diagnostic to the health of our program. But what I'm telling you is you're not in trouble. Let's prioritize. Let's focus. How many security bugs can you fix this sprint? 2? Great. Here are the 2 that I would recommend. Can we get to 3? Could we have a stretch goal of 4? How many can we get in there? And let's talk about that. And then let's go communicate to leadership what that risk is. In our consulting, we have security teams that get really excited to bring us in to help them develop what we call the secure developer experience, which is a security program that is dev UX focused. And the engineering teams are scared that the security consultants are going to show up and make them look bad, unleash a ton of new work on them. And when I say, well, no, actually, we would love to have an airing of grievances. We want you to tell us all the things that you hate about your security team and that you are worried about in your product so that we can help. Do you understand that one of our recommendations might be for the company to hire more application engineers on your team? And they're like, wait, what? We might get more headcount out of this? And I'm like, well, what we're going to do is look at your priorities and the security team priorities and help you escalate them to leadership together, because it's leadership that needs to make these trade-offs. You can have the feature or you can have the security given the current team size, or you can give us more resources to do both. And the idea that the engineering and the security teams would escalate something together doesn't cross their mind. And so this is a skill that we need to learn to really enable the business. And enabling the business means speaking the language of the business. What is product-led growth? Most security teams have no idea what product-led growth is. They don't know these aspects of revenue generation or what leadership cares about. What goes to the board? What is a risk register? These are things that if you're early in career, probably don't, this might be a little advanced, but when you get into certainly senior and principal and leadership levels, you need to learn the business outside of security. Because you can't be a partner to the business if you don't speak their language. Just like they aren't going to understand security, nor are they going to take the time to understand security if you aren't meeting them halfway. Because at the end of the day, our job is to enable customer trust. Can customers trust our products? And because we're QA and we're working with the engineering teams, that's what we're focused on. So all the decisions that our engineers make and that our company makes are focused on, is this a trustworthy product customers can use in their environment? Can they share their data with us? Are we doing the right thing? When we have an incident, are we communicating in a timely and transparent way so they feel like they can trust us? If your customers 10% of the time, if you're late on communicating or you're opaque on communicating an incident and they have to pull it out of you, or they're like, I don't know what's going on. Maybe I have to work all weekend on an incident. Maybe I don't. Were they affected? Weren't they? I think they were. If that's only 10% of the time, the other 90% of the time, they're still not going to trust you. Can I trust this is all of it? Is there more I need to know? And so we are that customer trust advocate within the company. And that's another reason why it's so important to understand your customers and understand what they care about. Because it's not always what the security teams care about. So we can make this better by changing the way we work in this system. DevSecOps doesn't have to fail, but we have to redefine the way security interacts in it and really meet our developers and improve their user experience. So, I call it the secure developer experience. It's not my idea. Dino Daizovi presented that at a conference in 2022, and I'm like, that is exactly it. It's not about DevSecOps. It's not about secure development lifecycle. It's about the dev UX to do the right thing. And so let's make it easy. Let's create these paved paths for them where Why would I roll my own crypto? There's like a really easy library I can use right here. Why would I create a completely new secret storage, model? We have HashiCorp. It's already implemented. It's already approved. We're going to use this thing, whatever the tool might be. If they really, really, really want to go off-roading and get off this beautiful 8-lane paved superhighway we've created for them, well, that's what the security team's there for. We can help them. But we don't have to gate everything. If your feature is low risk and it's a minor revision, maybe it doesn't need an updated threat model, full security review, and pen test. Maybe that one's okay to go. I'm sorry, you're changing authentication? Yeah, we should do a review of that. And so really making those risk-based decisions where we can partner with the business versus be a gate before release blocking the business. So I have a couple minutes left if there are any questions. And thank you so much for coming to my rant on DevSecOps and how we're doing it wrong. And I hope that this will help everybody think about how we can do things differently.